Welcome to the Manx Theatre podcast.
Come on to the theatre!
Hello, and welcome back to episode 32 of the Manx Theatre podcast with me, Neil Callin. Thank you to everyone who's listened to our previous episodes. If you're brand new to the podcast, welcome along and thanks for joining us. In this podcast, we like to try and keep you up to date with what's going on in theatre on the Isle of Man and chat to the cast and creatives of upcoming shows to find out a little bit more about the shows and the people behind them.
Coming up in this week's episode.
In the final part of our Sweeney Todd trilogy, I'm joined by one of the newest leading ladies of Manx Theatre, ahead of her performance as Mrs Lovett in the Manx Operatic Society's production of Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street, which, following an unexpected delay, will now run from Saturday the 12th to Friday the 18th of March. When we recorded this episode, on a rare night off from rehearsals, we were not aware of the impending delay and had assumed we would be open when this episode dropped. We'll find out a little more about the show, her character, and see how well she knows the show. You can listen to all of our previous episodes through all of the usual podcast outlets and at manxradio.com/podcasts. Whilst you're there, make sure to subscribe, give us a like, rate and leave a little review and share with all your friends. Make sure you keep up to date with what's going on between episodes by following Manx Theatre Podcast on both Facebook and Instagram and at Manx Theatre Pod on Twitter. Okay, down to business. Joining me today on the podcast is an actor, writer and director who's becoming one of the leading ladies in Manx Theatre, playing the role of Mrs Lovett in the current production of Sweeney Todd. Gemma Varnom, welcome to the Manx Theatre podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Great, it's great to have you here, Gemma. So, as we said, well, tonight, as far as we're concerned, is Monday the 21st of February. For us, it's just under 2 weeks to go until opening night, but this will be going out on the Monday of show week for us, so we'll have had one already under our belt, and the second one just about to happen. And I've just got all the hairs on my arms have just stood an end whilst thinking about that.
It's getting very close now, isn't it?
Yes. So how are you feeling? How is Mrs Lovett going for you?
Mrs Lovett's going very well, I think. This is by far the biggest role I've ever had to play. Mm-hmm. In terms of word count, because she never shuts up. But also just it's such a dream role for me. Yeah. And it has been for a long time. It was one I never thought I stood a chance of getting. I know people say when they audition, oh, I'd be happy to just be in the chorus, but that really is all I expected. So to get to play a role like this has been incredible, but also very, very daunting.
Yeah, I mean, it's a Sondheim, so it's never going to be straightforward, is it?
No, it's fiendish. It's the kind of show where none of us can drop our focus, take our eye off the ball for a second. There isn't a page in this score that's easy and straightforward. So it's been a huge challenge. And I've been doing theatre for a long time, but never anything this, as I say, a role this big. So it's, and playing opposite David Artis, who's of course Manx Theatre royalty as well. And I always think people catch sight of the posters and go, "Oh, David Artis, he's very good. Who the heck's that?" So I feel like I've got a lot to prove. Yeah. And hopefully people will be pleasantly surprised.
Oh, I'm sure they will. I mean, you're doing a fantastic job. I mean, the character of Mrs Lovett, though, there's many levels to her, isn't there?
She's very complex. I mean, she's quite a comic character. She's the sort of lighter foil to Sweeney, who can be very brooding and monosyllabic sometimes. And she's almost like something out of a very grisly music hall act. Yeah. So she can be funny, but also very ruthless and callous and has this extremely dark side to her. But then sometimes she can display compassion and has a few moments that are somewhere, verging on quite touching. Yeah,
I mean, she has these real motherly moments with Tobias, certainly in the second half, where she could kind of adopts him as her own. Yeah. But in the first half, she's almost steering Sweeney down this road of revenge, isn't she?
They're kind of using each other. Yeah. But she is very manipulative. She's always nursed this crush on Sweeney. Yeah. And now he's walked back into her life and her situation is quite desperate. The business is not going well. Mm-hmm. Customers are not turning up to the pie shop. And this man, who she's always been fond of, walks back through her door and she kind of hangs all her hopes on him for a better life. And she knows he's hell-bent on revenge. But she kind of, as you say, she steers him in a direction that benefits her. And I think that's what makes their dynamic so interesting. Even when they're working together and seem to be getting along, I think there's always that undercurrent of a power struggle and which one of them is in control at any given time, because he is a dangerous man.
Yeah.
And I think there's something about that kind of appeals to her. I think she's the kind of woman who would go and marry an East End gangster, you know. But she is trying to keep him on a leash and make this situation work. And whether she succeeds is you'll have to come and see how that works out.
Oh yes, definitely. So I mean, as far as we're concerned, as far as this podcast is concerned, we're open, we're running. Tickets are available. Get your tickets and come down and see it, because we're on until Saturday. Make sure you get there quick, because once we're finished, we're gone, and that's it.
Yep.
Musicals then are something that's, as far as I'm aware, that they're fairly new to you. I mean, I've known you in theatre for a long time, but you've tend to stray more towards the straight plays with the Legion plays and the service plays, etc.
Yeah, I spent years with the Legion plays, but when I moved over here, that's what I first got involved with. Spent a large number of years with them and played some great roles, and I always loved musical theatre, but never really thought I could be a part of it. Never thought I had much of a singing voice. And then I got involved with the Peel Panto. And I was playing the principal boy. And I had to sing a duet with a friend of mine, Mel Reid, who's got a stunning voice. And she sang opera, classical, and I felt quite intimidating having to sing with her. But it inspired me to go and get some lessons. And luckily I found the most amazing teacher who brought things out in my voice that I had no idea were there. Yeah. And encouraged me to start going for musicals. And I went for a show with the Gilbert and Sullivan Society, as was. And then kind of made that transition.
So which show was that then? Which was the
Mikado.
The Mikado.
So I had a small part in that, but then that turned out to be their last GNS show at the Gaiety. After that year, they made the decision that GNS just doesn't have the same audience appeal that it did a few decades ago. And
it's quite niche, GNS, these days, isn't it?
It's niche. And I think it's going to get more and more so. I mean, the vast majority of younger people don't really want to come and see it. No. And so they made that decision to start putting on musicals as opposed to operettas. And the first one that they staged was High Society.
Ah, yes.
Yes, which we were in together.
We were both in, yes.
And I got the most incredible role in that. The only time in musicals I've ever got to play a romantic lead. And after Mrs Lovett, that may not happen again. I think I'm in firm comedy hag territory for the rest of my days now.
Mrs Lovett has a romance of sorts.
In her own head, she certainly does.
Yes,
yeah.
A bit one-sided, really, maybe.
It's very one-sided. I mean, there's the song By the Sea in Act 2, and she's sharing her actually quite modest and very sweet dream of getting married and retiring and running a B&B at the seaside, which is lovely. And she's singing this song about how it's going to be and what she dreams of, and you've got Sweeney sat there just sort of going, whatever you say, anything you say. Yeah. And she's not picking up on any of this. Yeah. As far as she's concerned, they're in love.
Now, anyone who's ever done a show with you will know that, rather annoyingly, come the first rehearsal, you are usually off book completely, if not almost,
I do seem to have a reputation for that, don't I?
It's very daunting, and it makes the rest of us feel very, very lazy. Is there a necessity for that? I mean, because I know that you're partially sighted, so is that part of the reason behind it? Is that why
it is? Yeah. I mean, my vision is such that I can read standard size print, like in a script, but I would have to hold the book very close to my face, which is good neither for me nor whoever I'm acting opposite. Yeah. So it is, and it's a lifetime of practice, really, and training my brain to be good at taking in information quickly, whether it's in a musical score or a script. Yeah. I mean, I barely know what day of the week it is, but I could probably still rhyme off songs from shows I was in 8 or 9 years ago. So yeah, that's just something I've had to adapt to do. But yeah, I know it's quite annoying for everybody else when I come in going, well, I've already learnt my lines.
I think I've got these 3 lines on that page, but the rest of it, I haven't a clue. Yeah. Gemma knows the whole thing.
Sorry.
But that's good though, because I mean, it obviously it puts a what's the word I'm trying to think of? it's not a threat, but it gives us a bit of an incentive for us to catch up with you and make us sort of go back and learn our scripts and to keep up with you.
I mean, that's absolutely not why I do it.
Yeah.
I say it's not a showing off thing. It's not making out that I'm better at this than anybody else. It is purely because it makes my life easier and everybody else's lives easier who are working alongside me. So
it's probably quite liberating though, because you're not there. I mean, from day one, you've got rid of the book. You can just concentrate on your lines and acting the scene as set by the director then.
Yeah, I think everybody finds it easier, even though it's daunting that first time when you put your book down.
Yeah.
And suddenly you've got a free hand and you've no idea what to do with it. And you can't hide behind your book anymore. But yeah, you can, especially with a character like Mrs Lovett as well, you have that freedom to go into more depth about, well, okay, I know what I'm saying. Maybe I can try different ways of saying it.
Yeah.
With someone like Mrs Lovett, we don't actually get much detail about her backstory in the script. So
Yeah.
I've kind of filled in some gaps on my own, and it's not something the audience will ever know that I've decided, but it's things that do inform my performance and how I approach a scene. And once I've got that script out of the way, there's a lot more time for doing that, really digging into a character's psyche, which I find quite fun.
Yeah, I mean, I sit there and I scribble all sorts of notes all over my script, so I can, when I'm stood there with it in my hand, more often than not, I'm trying to read what I've got written down the side where I should be laughing or moving or whatever, rather than concentrating on the lines. And it's worse sometimes rather than just not having and just going with it. So, but does your sight, does it affect you on stage or when you're moving around?
It can do. I mean, there's a couple of areas where sometimes I find things a bit difficult. One is in the rehearsal room, and it's learning choreography, because I'm very much a mover, not a dancer. I've had no dance training. So if I'm, say, in an ensemble doing a big dance number, I'll usually be put on the back row because that's where they put the lots of great dancers. And that's fine. That's where I belong. But with me being at the back, that puts me at quite a distance from the person at the front who's demonstrating steps. So I usually can't see them in any great detail, and I just have to copy off whoever's in front of me and hope to God they know what they're doing. Otherwise, there's this whole knock-on effect. So that can be tricky. Yeah. And in the theatre itself, for anyone listening who's never been backstage at the Gaiety, it is dark and it is cluttered with bits of scenery, bits of furniture, other people. I mean, the last play I was in, I remember being backstage with a group of the actors, and the stage manager came through and went, "Oh, mind that spike." Which, if you can't see where you're going that way, is not what you want to hear. So I, especially coming straight off stage as well, when you've had the bright lights in your face, and then you go straight into that quite pitch black, really. Yeah. It's difficult, and if I have to move quite quickly to come on the other side of the stage in the next scene, I've been quite bruised and battered because I've collided with things. Yeah. But with things like that, there's always a fix, and it's not a difficult fix. Yeah. It could be just another cast member who's not needed could kind of assist me backstage, or in terms of learning steps, maybe I could just temporarily move to the front, and then once I know what I'm doing, go back into place. But it's... I always say, and this isn't just in theatre, this is just in life in general, the biggest obstacle that I have, the biggest difficulty is overcoming other people's attitudes and assumptions. Yeah. And if it's the kind of company who makes it clear that I can sort of ask for little tweaks to things, then that's great. They suddenly stop being problems. And I have to say, the Manx Ops have been... brilliant from day one. In fact, on day one, Nikki, the assistant director, and Ian, the stage manager, took me to one side and said, "Okay, we're aware there's this thing. We don't really know anything about it. Could you explain it, and just how can we help? How can we support you?" And that's all it takes. Yeah. That in all the shows I've ever done, no one's done that, and it's always what I've hoped people would do, and I'm really grateful they did that, because it makes me feel comfortable to ask for things that I might need, and know they've kind of got my back. And with the way that the set is being built as well, with that sort of high rostra, there's handlebars for you to get down, and we know that there's a scene with several corpses on the floor, that everything was moved so that there was a clear route for you through, rather than you worrying about to trip over,
standing on me.
So you Yeah, not to give too much away about the plot, I was going to trip over your corpse at one point. Yeah, I mean, John Cumberledge, the director, I've worked with him on a couple of productions before, and he's always taken it completely in his stride. I mean, despite the fact that he is very exacting.
Oh, yes.
And a real perfectionist, he's never made it seem like I was a bother at all, which is great. Sadly, it doesn't always happen that way. When it does, it's great. When it's not, a small problem can quickly become a very stressful situation.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, any directors of any future shows are listening. all it takes is just, if you're not sure and you're worried about doing the wrong thing or saying the wrong thing, just ask.
Yeah.
And we'll have a conversation and trust that if I've come into your audition room, I strongly believe that I will be fine in this show, and I'm not gonna be a liability or anything. And so don't assume that I'm gonna be incapable.
Yeah. And you've proved yourself in many shows. I mean, you were in 9 to 5 as well, weren't you? You were one of the 3 leads in 9 to 5. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was with the Douglas Choral Union?
It was, and they were great as well. Again, another great director who had actually worked with blind students in a youth drama group before, so was very aware of things and didn't have those kind of false assumptions in place. Because I completely understand where they come from, that maybe if you've never met someone with low vision or you've just seen films which are notoriously inaccurate, that you might get this impression that there's going to be very little I can do, or that I have no vision at all.
Yeah. You expect me to walk around with a big white stick and
or a dog, or just crashing into walls all the time, and that's it's not the case. So it's just kind of sometimes I do feel like, even though, as you say, I've done a lot of shows and I've had years of experience, that I do have to prove myself a bit more, which gets very frustrating, because sometimes I feel like minds have been made up before I've even opened my mouth. And it's hard to change people's minds if they have an idea in their head before you've even started your audition. I
mean, I've had a similar thing to that, where because I'm quite a strong dancer, I've been gone for principal roles, for the lead roles, and I thought, actually Neil's more valuable in the ensemble, and I've ended up dancing my way out of a lead role because I'm better suited in the ensemble.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because I think you get kind of put in a little pigeonhole. Like I say, I've been in the character actor pigeonhole for a long time. Even when I was sort of young enough to play the sort of sweet ingenue, I was never cast in those roles. I would still be cast as a 60-year-old hag with a comedy regional accent. And sometimes I just long to be the glamorous leading lady. And
I don't know, because way back in 99, 2000, we both played in Rookery Nook, and you were young Poppy the lifeboat girl.
Rookery Nook. Don't bring back traumatic memories on this podcast, Neil. Yes, Rookery Nook, which was a terrible 1920s farce.
A Cooney farce, wasn't it?
A Ray Cooney farce. So it was all kind of slamming doors and running around, and young ladies in their underwear.
Yes.
Namely me. Yes, and
you weren't that old at the time either.
I was not. No, I was about 15. It was. I'm not sure it's entirely legal. And I'll always remember that it was terrible. And I didn't come on till Act 3. Yeah. And I'll always remember I knocked at the door of this house, and my first line was, "Flags for the lifeboat."
It's amazing what sticks in your mind, isn't it?
I'll
20 years
never
later.
forget that one.
I mean, I can remember the first line from the Peel Panto that I did in 1994 when I was tomfoolery, Red Riding Hood's brother. It's just crazy what sticks in your mind. And could I remember what Emma asked me to do before I went up? No, not at all, not a chance. How did you get started, Gemma? What was it that first got you into theatre in the first place?
Well, I mean, I'd loved kind of performing and I suppose being the centre of attention since I was a kid. But I think as any child who can project and learn lines will know, that doesn't necessarily mean you get to sort of be Mary in the Nativity. It means you get to stand at the side and be the narrator.
Yep, narrator for many years as well.
So frustrating. All I wanted to do was be up there in, a tea towel and a dressing gown and playing some sort of role. And so eventually I joined a youth drama group at the weekends, and that led to the first ever show that I was in, which was a production of The Railway Children.
Right.
And it was just an amateur production in a very small community theatre in Rochdale.
Yeah.
But to 11-year-old me, that was like it was like I was playing Matilda on the West End.
Yeah.
I thought I'd made it.
Yeah.
And I really got the bug from that. And then not too long after I moved here and just happened to see a poster for Legion Players auditions.
Right.
And that was how I got started.
Brilliant. So with that role then in The Role with Children, is that the first role that you ever played?
Outside of school and things, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
I was one of the Perks children.
Wow.
And in fact, I was one of the boy roles, but they didn't have enough boys auditioning, so they stuck me in a flat cap. So I played Bert.
I saw a production at QE2 a few years ago of Joseph's Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, and my nephew was in it, and I think there's supposed to be 12 brothers, and they had 7, and 3 of them were girls. So similar situation.
Yeah, I mean that's actually another kind of pigeonhole I've been put into. Not so much now, but when I was growing up, when I was a teenager, because I always had short hair. If I wasn't playing a 60-year-old comedy hag, I was playing a boy. So I got used to that very quickly.
Brilliant. If there's a role that's at the top of your bucket list, what would be what's the dream role? What's the one role that you would kill to play?
I mean, there's a whole long list of them. But just to pick one, I would really love to play Sally Bowles in Cabaret.
Ooh.
I've already got the haircut.
I'm
ready
already got
to
the
go.
haircut. Yeah.
But it's got a lot of the things that appeal to me. There is comedy character stuff involved, but there's also that darkness, which is a thing that appeals about Mrs Lovett too. And again, quite a complex character, not necessarily one who would make the same choices as I would, but then that's what we all love about acting. We get to just try on someone else's life and just I love the show. The music is great, and it's such a star-turn kind of a role.
But it's a dark show again, and it's a darker show than everyone ever really sort of gives a thought for. They just think of the big numbers
the glitz and the showbiz stuff. But yeah, it's
and the Liza Minnelli film, and they forget about the fact there's the Holocaust and all the
I like a
of
bit of darkness in my shows though. I love the humour and everything, but I do like it when things kind of explore darker or more political territory.
Yeah,
and that doesn't happen sometimes in musical theatre, certainly not in everything. I mean, the last production to be on at the Gaiety was The Hunchback of Notre Dame, which went to some quite dark places.
Yes, and while we're talking about it, was a fantastic production.
It was fantastic. I mean, the choir at the back, I was just, the sound they made was, I was blown away.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think musicals can certainly go into some quite dark territory, but I think a lot of the ones that I've been involved with or ones that tend to get bums on seats are kind of the lighter, more frothy things.
Fun.
And fun things, more light-hearted, a good night out at the theatre.
Like Spamalot. What a fun show that was.
It was, yes. I played multiple little roles in that. My favourite of which was getting to be the French taunter. And shout insults at you all from the battlements. That was a lot of fun.
I nearly put that T-shirt on tonight as well.
It's like your mother was a hamster and your father smelt of elderberries.
That's the one, yeah.
Yeah, that was the best part of the night for me. It was great as well because it, again, quite a daunting thing because there will be people, there are going to be people in that audience who know that sketch word for word.
Verbatim, yes.
And will be expecting it to be delivered as they expect it to be delivered. So there wasn't a massive amount of freedom in terms of characterisation, or you had to sort of stick to, what it was like in the film. But it was quite nice because I started that scene crouched behind the battlements and then I kind of sprang up. And the minute I sprang up in my armour and silly helmet and drawn-on moustache and said, "Hello, who is it?" And I just sort of always hear this little ripple from the audience of, "Oh, it's this bit."
Here we go, yeah.
Yeah.
You're listening to the Manx Theatre podcast with Neil Callin.
So have you ever done any Shakespeare?
No, I would love to. I'm actually
Me too.
Gutted that I couldn't audition for Much Ado About Nothing because, we're talking about dream roles. Beatrice is on my list of dream roles. I would give my right arm to play Beatrice, but unfortunately I was too busy playing another dream role.
Yes.
There was too much of a crossover with Sweeney, so I couldn't go for it. But I've for quite a number of years, I've really, really wanted to do some Shakespeare. I studied quite a bit of it at university, but only ever got to sort of workshop odd scenes.
Yeah.
Never actually done a full production, but it's on my bucket list.
So what did you do at university?
The course was called English and writing and performance, brackets, theatre/film/television, close brackets.
So it's pretty open then.
It's a big... I mean, what it really was, I think, was a course aimed at teaching you to think like a director.
Yeah.
It was for training up directors. Unfortunately, I came out the other side of it thinking, I'm not sure I'm geared up to be a director.
Mm-hmm.
But it did give me a lot of insight into how to look at a script and see and envision a production.
Yeah.
And see beyond kind of the words on the page and how you can bring them to life. I have directed. It's not my favourite thing. I'd rather be up there performing.
You'd rather be in the spotlight.
Yeah, well, I'd rather not have all the responsibility.
Well,
that's what scares me about directing. The buck stops with you.
Yeah. So away from theatre then, you're a writer as well, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, I do bits of freelance writing here and there, and I write fiction as well. My dream outside of theatre stuff is to be a published author one day. So doing my best to achieve that.
Have we got something in the works at the moment, or is there one of the lots of little unfinished projects that they're waiting to be?
No, I'm very close to finishing a full manuscript that I'll be sending off to literary agents and things. So wish me luck.
Exciting. Well, watch this space then in that case. Yeah.
Well, we'll see.
We'll see.
I mean, it's a lot of things in the publishing industry are down to luck and timing and all kinds of things beyond your control.
Yeah.
But it can happen. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed that one day it will.
Going back to theatre then, of the shows that you've been in, I mean, actually, I was going to say when we were talking about Shakespeare there before, do you think there's a Lady McBee in there? Being as she's dark and scary.
She's dark, yeah. Yeah, that would be quite a good role. I think what I like about Shakespeare, though, about modern productions, is that you're not necessarily limited to your own gender.
No.
I've seen quite a few productions on things like Theatre Live, the televised ones. I saw one, it was a trilogy, and it was all set in a women's prison. Mm-hmm. But they did The Tempest, Henry the Fourth, Part 1, and Julius Caesar, and it was with an all-female cast.
Oh, wow.
And it didn't matter, and it didn't feel gimmicky, and a lot of the cast were using their own regional accents. Yeah. And Shakespeare, with a really strong Glaswegian accent, sounds amazing. But it just sort of opens up the possibilities as to what is possible.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, Lady Macbeth, I'd love to play that, but, why not Hamlet?
Yeah.
Let's go for the really.
There are so many things, right? Yeah, because Maxine Peake, she played Hamlet, didn't she?
She did.
Fairly recently?
That was. I don't know if you do this, but whenever I go and see a play or I read a script, I automatically pick the part I would want.
Oh yes, every time, time.
And with Hamlet, there was nothing I wanted. Ophelia never appealed. Gertrude never appealed. And I just thought, I don't want to be in that play. And then I saw the Maxine Peake production, and I thought, oh, well, why not that part?
Yeah.
She was great. I'm a big fan of hers.
I mean, and they're doing it in the West End now as well. With the most recent version of Company, the character Bobby switched genders as well.
Yes.
So,
Being Alive is possible. If I can pick one favourite musical theatre song, if I had a gun to my head and I had to pick one, Being Alive might be that one. So yeah, to have the opportunity to sing that, I can't sing it without filling up. Yeah. Completely getting choked up. I can't ever get through it. But things are just becoming less rigid. Yeah. In terms of that, people are playing around a bit more, and I think that's really exciting.
During lockdown on the National Theatre Live, there was a production of Midsummer Night's Dream. Yes. And they'd tweaked that slightly, so the opening bit was a bit more kind of Handmaid's Tale. Yeah. But then when they went into the actual sort of story, they'd switched around Titania and Oberon.
Yeah.
So that it was Titania that put the spell on Oberon to make him fall in love with Bottom. And from there on in, it was anyone's game.
Well, it's that kind of thing you hear about it and think, oh, sacrilege.
Yeah.
You can't mess about with the bard like that. But then I watched it and it was completely irreverent.
It's one of the best productions I think I've ever seen.
Oh, it was so much fun.
Yeah.
And it was irreverent without being disrespectful to Shakespeare or the text. It was just, well, hang on, there's been 1,000,001 productions of this that have been played very straight. Why can't we try new things?
Exactly. And Oberon's seduction of Bottom to the soundtrack of Beyonce was just something else.
Yeah. It was It was great. It was for anyone who thinks Shakespeare is very kind of dour and serious and
Stuffy and boring.
Stuffy and boring and not a good night out. I would say try and find some copy of that production somewhere, and it will change your mind.
It was brilliant.
It was accessible. I think there wouldn't be anyone who went away thinking, well, I didn't understand that, or that was too highbrow for me. It was showing that Shakespeare is for the masses. It's for everyone. Yeah,
I mean, Shakespeare done well. I mean, it takes a couple of minutes for your ear to tune in, but after that, you shouldn't notice the fact that it's in old-fashioned language or whatever.
I remember not so long ago I watched, and again it was through the Theatre Live on TV, and I watched Andrew Scott playing Hamlet, and I watched it with my mother, who has not gone to uni and studied Shakespeare, and whenever I dragged her to productions, when I was younger, she'd say, well, it was good and everything, but I didn't really understand the kind of minutiae of what they were saying.
Yeah.
But with Andrew Scott, who I really admire because he acts, but he doesn't do acting.
Yes.
He's very naturalistic, and it's like he's just thought of the words a split second before he said them.
Mm.
And she said that was the first time that I saw Shakespeare and I understood every word. I completely got what they were saying. And it's because it was done not in that sort of 1980s BBC, very declamatory fashion.
Received pronunciation.
Yes.
Okay, as I was going to say a minute ago before we suddenly stuck back into that Shakespeare, what would be the favourite role that you've played so far?
I mean, the cheats answer is Mrs Lovett, and she may have got to the top spot now. It's a tie. There's two. One is when I was 18, I got to play Eliza Doolittle in Pygmalion.
Mm.
And did that slap bang in the middle of my A-levels, but didn't care because I just had to play that role. And the other one is Tracy Lord in High Society.
Right.
I wouldn't say it was my favourite show or my favourite production that I've been in, but that role, when I went into it, it was one of those, well, I have nothing in common with this woman. She's rich, privileged, quite in love with herself.
Yeah, bit stuffy,
and has 3 men fawning over her.
Mm.
That does not reflect my real life in any way. But the more, like I said, I really like to kind of dig into a character's psyche. And the more I did that, she has a lot of vulnerability and insecurities that she masks. And I found that I sort of had more in common with her than I thought I did. And I really enjoyed the fact that in a light, fun, frothy musical, she was quite a complex character.
Yeah.
She had more depth than I thought she did at the beginning. So I really enjoyed the process of kind of unearthing that.
It's quite a growth of character, isn't it, throughout the show as well? So she comes to terms with who she is and who she really loves, and has to kind of confront the maybe not so pleasant sides of her. I forget which one of the 3 of us she eventually ended up with, whether she ended up with the man who she was going to marry or the ex-husband.
The ex-husband.
Yes.
Yeah, and then your character ended up with the photographer lady who you were working with.
Yes, which wonderfully played by Lisa Dancox.
Yes.
A lot of fun, the 4 of us, with Simon Fletcher as well, wasn't it?
Yep.
Okay, we've talked a few bits there about the roles that you've played and some of the eccentric bag ladies that you've played. Costumes. There must have been some interesting costumes over the years. What would you reckon? Would you say are probably the best and the worst costumes that you've had to wear over the time?
I think the best would have definitely been something John Cumberledge put me in, because he's very skilled at that. I think probably the dress I wore for the Masquerade number in Phantom of the Opera. And it was one of those, when I first saw it on the hanger, I thought, what is that? It was this pink and lilac kind of, almost looked like a kind of sugar plum fairy type dress. There were striped tights that were the colour of bagpuss.
Instant vision.
And I thought, what on earth is it? But then when I put it on, it fit perfectly, and it fit the scene. We were all in these fabulous sort of outlandish masquerade ball costumes, and it looked great. And looking at the pictures under the lights, it looked great. And ever since then, I've completely trusted John's judgment on whatever he's going to put me in.
So that's the best one.
The worst one.
What's the worst?
I mean, it's hard to narrow it down, but it would have been something from my Legion Players days, because, bless them, companies like Legion Players, Service Players just simply do not have the budget and the sponsorship and things that the big musical societies do. So they can't just go and hire things from the national
the RSC or whatever.
We managed to a couple of times, actually, and we got some beautiful things. But most of the time what would happen is the wardrobe mistress would come round and say, have a look around the charity shops
Yeah.
and see what you can find, which wasn't so bad if the play was set in the 80s.
Yeah.
Not so easy if it was set in the 1880s.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
I found a nice bustle dress down in Oxfam.
yeah. It's not often you find full kind of Regency regalia in the Red Cross. So, yeah, I wore some quite shocking things.
Yes.
But that's what happens. It's amateur theatre. Sometimes you're working on a budget of about £3.90.
Exactly, yeah.
And it's all you can do.
You just got to make the best with what you've got, and quite often as well, some things that your costumes like that will look terrible in the stark light of day, but once they're lit and you're on that stage in the right scene, then suddenly they can look an awful lot better than they.
I think sometimes as well you have to just let your own pride and ego, put that to one side and go, I'm not wearing that. That's incredibly unflattering, but if it fits the character, it's got to be done, hasn't it?
Yeah. Okay, so this last question then. This is our gender swap question.
Yes.
Sometimes this is more difficult for the guys than the girls, and I don't know whether that's because of historically there haven't been that many shows with big female leads, and quite often the girls find it a little bit easier, or actually sometimes some of the girls tend to struggle because they don't want to go straight, well, obviously it's Javert or it's Valjean. And
yeah, Javert was my first kind of knee-jerk answer was Javert, but then I thought, that's such a basic answer.
Yeah, it's kind of obvious.
Yeah. I had to think about this. In musical theatre, there's one role I would love to play, and it's in a show that is very popular in the US. It's one that every Amdram group does. Not so popular in the UK, which is The Music Man.
Oh, yes.
I think it has such a clever score. Hugh
Jackman's
really like
currently
it.
got a revival on Broadway at the moment, isn't he? Yeah.
So I would say, Harold Hill in The Music Man, because I love fictional characters who are roguish, who are, kind of tricksters, fast talking, smooth talking, can talk their way out of any bad situation.
A lovable rogue. And that's who Harold Hill is. He's a con man. Yeah.
He's a slick con man. And there aren't that many female roles like that. So I'd love the opportunity to play him or someone like him one day.
Okay, now this is where we get a little bit serious.
Yes.
Now it's time for the Sweeney Todd quiz. Right, so I've asked the same questions with David, Alex and Hannah, and let's see how well you do. I'm going to break you in easy.
Okay.
But there are some tricky ones in the middle. And maybe finish off with some easy ones as well, but let's see. Anyway, right, okay, here we go. Question number 1. Who wrote the music and lyrics for Sweeney Todd?
I think that was Stephen Sondheim.
Correct. So that's 1. So you're not a complete tin hat. Sounds good.
No, I got 1. This is good.
What year was the original Broadway production?
Ooh. 79?
Oh, on the head. And then the following year, in 1980, it hit the West End.
Oh.
Okay. Who played Sweeney Todd and Mrs Lovett in the original London cast?
The London cast. I think Mrs Lovett was, Sheila Hancock.
Oh, she certainly was.
And I cannot remember who played Sweeney.
It was Dennis Quilley.
Ah.
Give you a half for that one.
Okay.
In the movie version, who played Judge Turpin and Beadle Bamford?
That was Alan Rickman and Timothy Spall.
Oh, you're on fire. Right, question number 5.
Giving away spoilers there.
Oh. Oh, yeah. Oh, I never thought about that. Right, question 5. And now this is one you'll either know or you won't. So it's probably just finger in the air and have a guess.
Yep.
How many Tony Awards did the original Broadway production win?
I've absolutely no idea. Let's say 6.
Ooh, 8.
8.
Oh. It was nominated for 9, but only won 8.
Ah.
So it won Best Musical, Book of Musical, Original Score, Leading Actor, Actress, Direction, Scenic Design, Costume Design. And the only one it missed out was Lighting.
Ah. Well,
But
I'm sure they were all well-deserved.
I'm sure they were pretty happy with getting 8 of them anyway.
Yep.
Okay, what is the opening number of Act 2?
God, that's good.
God, that's good. I would have also accepted More Hot Pies because no one's entirely sure which one it is actually called.
No, that's the most frequent lyric, I think, in a song.
Okay, question 7. How many people are killed by Sweeney throughout the run of the show?
Right, I'm going to have to tot this up. I'm going to count on my fingers. Let me think.
No names.
No, I'm going to do this silently. So there's that one.
Mm-hmm.
There's him.
Mm-hmm.
There's that one. There's that one. There's that one. There's that one. 7?
8.
8. Who have I missed?
It's one at the end of God, That's Good.
Oh, that's who I missed. I'm busy on another bit of the stage. I don't even see that happen.
Yeah, I mean, that's, 8 is our best guess. There may be one or two more that we kind of that's inferred, but for the best guess,
many more.
It's 8. There's probably there's probably many more unseen, but ones that we do see, there is 8. Okay, question 8. In the Manx Operatic Society's 2004 production, who played the role of Mrs Lovett?
That was Sarah Holland.
Correct. Question 9. Now, this isn't actually referred to within the show, but it depends on how much research that you've done. In what year is Sweeney Todd set? And I'm talking about the original book that the play and the musical is based on. This may not necessarily be where John has set it, but the original story.
You and I had a conversation about this, and it's much earlier, I think. I think it was about in the 1780s or something, did you say?
I'll give you that, 1785.
Yeah. Whereas the production is 1850s.
I would say so, yeah. I mean, we had this conversation with Artie on his podcast, and he reckons that because of the guns that we're using, they decided there was one that was sort of 1700s, was a bit seemed too old, but the one from the 1800s seemed about right.
I think it's because as well, I think it's deliberately set in that kind of the middle of the 19th century because it's the Industrial Revolution, and it's
industrial, it's Victorianish. Yeah. Okay, the final question then. The story of Sweeney Todd first appeared in a series of Victorian penny dreadfuls, and it was serialised in a magazine over 1846 and 1847. It was called Sweeney Todd and the String of what?
Sweeney Todd and the String of... Oh, it's not sausages, is it?
No.
Murders.
Oh, no. String of Pearls.
Ah, okay.
I did start to read it, but I never got through it because I was reading it a bit late at night, and it's really quite a small print, and it's it's 1846 language, so it didn't really it wasn't a smooth read.
No,
I will get back to it at some point and read it and find out what happens to the Beetle Bamford.
Yeah.
So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 out of 10. Well done. You've joined with David. But I think
did I not even beat David?
You didn't beat David, no. His were largely guesses, to be honest. And I think you've done slightly better than the combined score from Alex and Hannah. So
okay, that's nothing to be ashamed of then.
Right. Okay, so moving on then. Our Spotify playlist. So back in July 2020, we launched our Spotify musical theatre playlist. Now this was our idea of having the ultimate musicals playlist. Neil King and I, when we set up, we added 10 songs each in because that made us a decent set playlist to begin with, because who wants to listen to a playlist with 2 songs? Since then, every person that's come onto our podcast has chosen a song that means something to them. It's a song that they've sung, or it's their favourite song from a musical. And so far, I mean, we're running up to about I think we've got about 47 songs on the playlist already now. So some of the highlights that we've got for time is Manx Operatic Society's very own Nikki Openshaw. She chose You Will Be Found from Dear Evan Hansen. Lorcan O'Mahony, he chose If Only You Would Listen from School of Rock. And David Artis chose The American Dream from Miss Saigon. So Gemma, what is your song and why?
My song is Shine Like the Sun from 9 to 5.
Oh.
And there is a slightly cheesy story behind this.
Lovely.
And it kind of touches on what we were talking about earlier with things that I can sometimes find difficult in productions, and sometimes that leads to a good experience or a bad experience.
Yeah.
Before I got the part in 9 to 5, I was involved in another production with another company. And unfortunately, it wasn't the most pleasant experience. I was very much outside of my comfort zone. Mm-hmm. So I sort of asked for a little bit of extra support. Sadly, that did not materialise. And I was unfortunately made to feel like I was causing problems,
right,
because of things I can't control. And it ended up getting quite upsetting, to the point where I had to leave that production, which I felt terrible about, because I didn't want to let people down. And also I was quite fearful of, I mean, the Isle of Man's a small place. I thought word would get around that I was a quitter and a liability and I'd never work in this town again. And I felt really, diva. And I felt really down about it. And then these auditions came up for 9 to 5. Not the type of show I would normally go for, but I thought, well, I'll listen to the soundtrack and see if I like it. And there's this song that comes at the end of Act 1, where the three leading ladies have just reached their limit with their awful misogynistic boss and decide that they're going to take some power back. And it's a very kind of feel-good, triumphant song.
Yeah.
And the verse that the character of Judy sings, when I was listening to it, it felt so sort of relevant that I kind of teared up a bit. And if I was the sort of person who believed in signs, I would have taken it as one. And so I auditioned, I got that part, and I got to sing those words on stage every night and really mean them. And just had a lovely time with a lovely bunch of people. And I don't know if anyone in the choral union realised how much my confidence and my self-esteem were on the floor when I came into that. But they certainly weren't by the end. And I'm really thankful for that. It was just one of those kind of serendipitous things where the right role and the right show came along at just the right time and, you know, scraped me off the floor and put me back on my feet. And then a couple of years later, I end up with a role like Mrs Lovett, and that was kind of what kept me going and kept me going back to auditions.
Perfect. Brilliant. Well, Gemma, thank you very much. It's been great to chat to you today on the podcast. I wish you all the very best going into Sweeney Todd. And,
likewise.
I'll be there behind you. And brilliant. Well done. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're listening to the Manx Theatre podcast.
So we've recently become aware of a few more productions taking place this year to add to the ever-growing list. The All Ireland Theatre Company are putting on a production of Matilda Junior from the 10th to the 13th of August, and then Three Legs Productions are producing Moana Junior from the 26th to the 29th of October at the Gaiety. Then, in November, Stage Door Entertainment are putting on a production called Elegies for Angels, Punks and Raging Queens. That'll be from the 23rd to the 26th of November at the Balcomine Studio Theatre. Elegies is a musical with music by Janet Hood and lyrics and book by Bill Russell. The work features songs and monologues inspired by the Names Project AIDS Memorial Quilt and the Edgar Lee's Masters Spoon River Anthology. Each of the monologues is written from the perspective of a character who've died from AIDS, and the songs represent the feelings of friends and family members dealing with the loss. Now, this is quite a considerable cast. I saw the cast list published last week, and there's about 40 named characters in there. One of which is me. I have to put my hand up and say that. So I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be interesting. So hopefully then we'll get a chance to catch up with the teams behind each of these productions in the future episodes. So with that, we bring episode 31 to a close. Thanks once again to David, Hannah and Alex and Gemma for joining me on the podcast to chat with me about Sweeney Todd. And we wish them all the very best for the show, which, following a delay, now runs at the Gaiety from Saturday the 12th of March to Friday the 18th of March. There's no shows on Sunday the 13th or Wednesday the 16th. So with just 5 performances, make sure you get your tickets now to avoid disappointment. You can get your tickets from villagaiety.com, the Welcome Centre, or by calling 600 555. Remember to like and follow our social media pages to get notifications of upcoming episodes and events. And don't forget to check out our Spotify playlist by searching for Manx Theatre Podcast under playlists. If you have any events that you'd like us to talk about or promote on a future episode, you can contact us through our social media accounts or by email to manxtheatrepodcast@gmail.com. All that remains is for me to say thanks for listening, and I hope you will join me again next time on the Manx Theatre Podcast. I've been Neil Callin. Goodbye.
The Manx Theatre podcast, taking a look behind the scenes of Manx Theatre.
Than actors alive for me.